Calen has some like Wednesday Addams vibes going on right now. How do you feel about that?
Do you mean Pugsley?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I don't know the characters of the Addams family.
A little bit.
Actually,
maybe if Cousin It on the chin.
Hello and welcome to Extra Time, driven by Continental. My name is Andrew Wiebe, and I'm joined, as always, by my partners in soccer, David Goss, Matt Doyle, and Calen Carr. We have a wonderful show.
Was that a different intro? What was that?
It was, and we'll get to that in just 1 second. We got a wonderful show for you today. The Union made a massive statement. The Supporters Shield is back on. Carlos Vela played for the first time since August, and he chipped somebody, so that's decent. And the playoff races are, I don't know what to make of them. As in, look, let's just get to it. Maybe you, like Calen, noticed the intro was different today. Maybe you know why. Before we talk soccer, a celebration. A celebration of a man's life. A celebration of his impact on so many of us. A celebration of Daryl Grove. Podcaster, center back, all-around good guy. It is with a heavy heart that I deliver the news that his friend and Total Soccer Show co-host Taylor Rockwell so graciously and eloquently shared with our little soccer community on Friday morning. Daryl passed away last week after battling cancer with more bravery, more optimism, and more enthusiasm than ought to be possible. He was surrounded by his wife, his mother, and his friends. He was our friend, even if we all hung out a couple times. Even if you never even met him. He was smart, he was funny, he was generous, he was kind. He was an unlikely cheerleader for American soccer, and he was the best of us. Rest easy, Daryl. You'll be missed, and terribly so. Your legacy will live on every time someone pulls the ball out for a kick around. Every time someone hashtag supports local soccer. Go Kickers. Every time someone plugs in a microphone or buys a beer and talks soccer with friends. So we grieve, and we do so knowing Daryl would want us to get on with it. Call your folks. Tell them you love them. Hug your partner if you've got one. Hug your kids if you're crazy enough to have those too. Tell the friends in your life what they mean to you. Watch more soccer than is rationable and explainable. Talk about the game like it's the only thing that matters, because sometimes maybe it is. One final request before I open things up to you guys. Everybody out there, while you're listening right now, open up the window, pop open that phone, Google Team Daryl Grove, and GoFundMe. Donate if you have the means. I know not everyone does have the means right now. That's okay. Cancer is a real you-know-what, and the bills from Daryl's treatment are going to start piling up. Let our legacy, the thousands of us that listen to him every single week, be that we take this one thing off his wife Shannon's plate. Let's make sure his family doesn't have to worry about that. They've got a man's life to celebrate. They've got to have their time to grieve. I spent a lot of time this weekend thinking about Daryl and thinking about why his death and his fight and his battle with cancer affected me so much when I didn't know him like so many others. You know, we texted, we hung out 5-6 times. I listened to the show. I felt a little bit guilty for being so broken up, but I think that speaks to sort of the power of Daryl and the power of his personality to jump out through headphones into your heart and just kind of grab you. So I don't feel emotional anymore. I have my ugly cries in my office. I hugged my wife. I hugged my kids. I honestly feel happy to have known him, and I feel happy that so many have had their lives truly impacted by him and are sharing those, and that this community is coming together and rallying around him and his family. So that's the way we start today's show. Before we get on with it and do, as we said the last time around when we told you that Daryl was in hospice, do what we do best, which is have inane soccer conversations. Doyle, Dave, anything you guys are feeling, want to talk about, want to say before we get into the Philadelphia Union and a blowout win for them?
I had the same experience with Daryl as you. You know, I only hung out with him maybe a half dozen times in real life, but we texted and we, well, I'll just say this personally. Sometimes, when I tongue firmly in cheek when I send some of those tweets out, they're only really meant for about 30 people in the world. Like there's only like that many people who really kind of get my awful personality and sense of humor. And even though I only knew Daryl for 4 or 5 years tops, he was one of them. And it broke me up real bad. And it's, life is unfair and death is even more so. And I'm going to miss Daryl for as long as I live. And I think there's a lot of people that feel that way. And I think that's a tribute to the man he was. And I think that it's our job as his friends to keep his memory alive.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we talked about it a little last week, but this weekend to watch the tributes to him across the league and across soccer in America, in supporter sections, on broadcasts, petitions to name stands after him. I thought someone had a really good one. It was to find a patch of trees and name a grove outside of Austin FC's new stadium, Darrell Grove. It just showed, I think, the community that is the soccer community, and something that he's helped build and create and turn into what could celebrate him, and has those connections across so many time zones and areas and around the world. I think we've talked about this a lot since March, especially. Like, this brings us all together and gives us a place. And he was someone who helped build that, and we'll always be thankful for him. And that's how we'll celebrate him, is continue to build this community, make it a safe, strong place, a place that he would be proud of.
I don't know if this is a good idea. I know I like the idea. Morgan Tins has sent it along, and I know she had spent a lot of time with Darrell and Taylor and the Cooligans and all those folks. And I do think that there ought to be a Darrell Grove Podcaster of the Year award in Major League Soccer. I'm not sure what it is and who it's for and what it means. But I do think that there ought to be something around this medium that he so artfully mastered, that he inspired so many people to, pick up a mic and give a try, that he helped create these really vibrant communities that inhabit every single one of our clubs and our culture. So if you have ideas around that, let me know. I do know that it's not going to be an extra time MLS thing. It can't be, it shouldn't be. It has to be a communal thing. And I think back, one of the things that I love about listening to Darrell, and then I try to do more, and maybe I don't do enough of, because look, I go through everything that all of you do out there, and I cherry pick things, and I see news and takes, and it's what inspires me to build this show and these conversations that we have. But I felt that Darrell would shout out anything, like he might have been listening to some obscure podcast that nobody but him has ever heard of, and you better be damn sure on the show, if he talked about that, he was going to say where it came from, and he was going to compliment those folks. And I think that's why this award fits so well. So if you have ideas, let us know. 401-206-0MLS, extra time at MLSsoccer.com. An emotional weekend, but full of joy, and should be full of joy. He gave so much, and we'll just do what we do now. And we'll talk soccer. And it's so terribly unfortunate that this year is the way it is, and it sucks. Because if this year was a different year, and that stadium on the banks of the Delaware was full of people, in Subaru Park, I know there were fans there, but if it was packed to the rafters and the Union ran over Toronto FC and then backed up and ran them over again and then backed up and ran them over again and did it 2 more times and won 5-0 against the Supporters Shield leaders and put themselves into a time first, it would have been apoplectic. It would have been like falling down. And it was exciting, and it was incredible, and the folks there, I envy you. But what a win this was, Doyle! Like, this was one of those wins where it feels like cathartic in some ways.
Yeah, I think that for Union fans and arguably probably the players and Jim Curtin as well, it must have felt like something special. And I got that sense actually from Jim Curtin's post-game presser, where he kind of, rather than talk about the game, he talked about the process that they've undergone over the 6 years now that he's been the head coach, and how they've improved a little bit and a little bit and a little bit every single year. You look at their points totals, point per game, goal differential, all of that. They have improved basically every year. And last year, the step was to win a playoff game. They got to the playoffs a couple of years back, then they won a playoff game last year. And then the step from there is always the toughest step, whether it's this sport or any other, is to go from a team that just makes the playoffs and maybe wins a game or two to a team that is legitimately competing for titles. Now, they had competed in the past for U.S. Open Cups, made some really good runs, never got over the hump. This summer, though, we saw them get to the semifinals of the MLS's back tournament, and they weren't just happy to be there. That was a team that felt like if it had gone in a different way in that game against Portland, it could have ended up with Philly in the final, and then from there, they would have liked their chances probably against Orlando City. This is a step beyond that. This is And I know that Toronto were missing 5 starters, maybe 6, depending on whether you think Michael Bradley should be a starter. But like this was okay. It's a must-win game. If we get this, we're 270 minutes away from getting our first piece of silverware in franchises. And they didn't just go out there and put in a good performance. They went out there and they dominated this Toronto team in a way they haven't been dominated in, it feels like, years. Maybe it is years. I know they had a terrible 2018 season, but even when they were losing games that year, they weren't losing them 5-0 and just never in the game. And it was done with ruthlessness and intentionality. Like, if you watch that first 25 minutes back, Philly was burying the ball up that right side and just completely tilting the Toronto entire defense to the point where Richie Larea, who's the right back, has to come into central midfield and be like a tertiary D-mid. And once you do that, you know that if they lose the ball in central midfield, if they lose a challenge in central midfield, the overlap from Kai Wagner is on. And I tweeted it like 3 minutes before it happened. The overlap was on. Kai Wagner got up the flank, crossed to Sergio Santos, who had split the center backs 1-0. And then this is the difference between the way the Union were, I think, last year and the way they are now. Once they got it to 1-0, it felt like 2-0 was inevitable. And once they got it to 2-0, it felt like 3-0 was inevitable. And it was just, it was a landmark victory. And they were thrilled afterwards, and they should be. But here's the warning. It doesn't mean anything. I don't say it doesn't mean anything. Yeah. It doesn't mean as much as it could if they don't go out there the next 3 games and get the job done.
But it still means something because it was a playoff game or it was a championship game. And I think that first 25 minutes, the idea that they could go there and to come in and dominate, and that TFC didn't belong on the field and they were going to win the game, not survive and then try and win it late. All of that is such an emotional victory for this team. And that's what Curtin touched on, was they came to win. They came to take that. They believed they could. And now they're going to believe that as a group forever. And I think when you look at teams over the last 10 years in MLS, and Doyle was saying in all sports, you need that to get over that hump. A lot of times it's one team. And I think Toronto is that team for Philly. The way they blew them out the first time they made the playoffs, and then kind of how it's gone along over the last few years. And so the emotional victory, Toronto had it over Montreal in 2015. Atlanta had to beat the Red Bulls. SKC had to beat RSL. Like, that's kind of how it works. And so that's
it. Time out.
SKC had to beat Houston.
Exactly. With Calen here, I mean, you see the photo in the back with the MLS Cup celebration. Respect.
I didn't play that game. I was injured.
Oh,
doesn't count.
No, they just called off. They deserve
big asterisk.
So yeah, that's all what I took away from that Philly game, was just the performance, the way they did it, the belief in that group, and it was fun. It was one of those moments. I think Ben Baer texted us like, "This is when you wish it was a normal year and people were in the stadium and you could feel the like cold October Northeast night, which has those like when Columbus was good under Berhalter and when the Revs made the MLS Cup, and those kind of have that playoff feel to it, and it had that vibe. And obviously 2020 is just a little different.
Calen, you went down to Philly. You've been around this team a good bit, and actually I just want to throw it out there. Thursday, Ray Gaddis will be on this show. So we'll talk to Ray about Philly and what has changed. He's been there for so long, seen so many iterations.
Is this a Philly Union podcast now?
I mean, it might as well be. After Mark McKenzie came on here and just like burned the house down, we got to keep going back to the source. What vibe were you getting off? And when you watch this game and see how this all goes down, how did you feel? And did you feel the same as me, which is whoever was producing this game on TV ought to have a good talking to for cutting for Mark McKenzie's celebration, because that was criminal. Yeah. Sorry, I had to get that in.
No, I mean, being around this team, I would say the last couple years, I've felt something special happening there. And then I think even around before the MLS's back tournament, I picked them to win it. That didn't end up happening, but I just feel like they've continued to grow. And there's definitely a good vibe and all that happening between the team. And I think one of the things you look at too is like Sergio Santos probably grabbed the headlines as, scoring a hat trick in this game. But I still think what separates this Philly team from so many other teams in MLS this year, and what gives them, I think, a real chance to potentially do the double is that they are so deep. Like the depth of this roster, the way they've constructed this roster is insane. I mean, we're watching the game and I'm like, all right, they're already up like 3 or 4 goals. I mean, it's Montero's goal. The third one I thought was like the biggest one, because we've seen TFC in the past go down 2-0 at halftime against Columbus or Red Bull or whoever and come back in the second half and equalize, if not win. And that's the type of character I think this TFC team has. But they got that third goal that was the killer from Montero. And then, but you just look around and you're like, all right, they've got Jack Elliott coming in late at defensive midfielder. He had like it reminded me a little bit, actually. He was way more comfortable. I know he'd played there before, but I hadn't seen that match. And he looked a little bit like Jeff Cameron. I'm not saying he's that quality, but he looked more comfortable than I expected there, and can play a serviceable role. Warren Craval's injured right now. But then you look around, it was like they were up like 5-0, and Fontana and Ilsinho were coming in, and that was after Burke. I mean, I was like looking through that group, and I was like, man, this team is perfectly situated, especially for a year like this where depth is tested, youth is tested, the experience of Alejandro Bedoya and others. I mean, they really have everything going for them, and with 3 games left, 2 of which are at home. They're only an MLS team undefeated at home right now. They are the odds-on favorite for the Supporters Shield.
Let's talk Supporters Shield. It's back. That's the big news from the Supporters Shield Foundation. The board came together. They had a vote, I believe. There was a lot of internal discussions. And here is what the statement is that they put out. And I think it's important to read this to better understand sort of the process they went through, where it ended up, and where we're going now. Quote, after consulting with all of the MLS ISC representation, we, the Supporters Shield Foundation Board, will be reversing our initial decision and awarding the Supporters Shield for the 2020 season. You asked to be heard. In the end, it was your input and votes that showed us that this is the right choice. We had based our initial decision on the many schedule imbalances throughout the 2020 season. However, the conversations we have had over the last week have proven that a winner should be declared no matter what. This trophy has been designed, funded, and overseen by the supporters. Even through the challenges that 2020 has brought, our supporters have endured and shown their team's love and passion. We will ensure the legacy that began in 1999 continues. We have but one truther here. His name is Matt Doyle. And Doyle, I want to better understand your point of view on all of this, being that you were a supporter for a number of years yourself, and now you're on this side of the fence, being that you have on this show...
AKA you're a sellout.
Yes.
That's right. On this show...
Just name the price, man.
sort of flogged this thing, even in times when maybe not everybody throughout the MLS world was sort of on board with its importance. What was this entire sort of moment in time for you as it pertains to the Supporters Shield? What does the Shield this year mean to you?
So a month ago on this show, we actually had this conversation. Like, what are we going to, what is going to happen with the Supporters Shield? And I was kind of on the fence, or maybe even leaning towards the decision that the Shield Foundation board made, which was it's just so imbalanced this year that I understand the decision not to award it. I could see either way, but then the response, first of all, from the fan base, which was like outrageous. People were really upset about that decision. First, like that buries the notion that people don't care about the Supporter Shield, or it's not a top tier trophy. It is like that. There is no more. You hear me, Calen? Don't look away. There is no more discussion now as to how much the Shield matters.
Did anyone lose Doyle? I can't hear him anymore.
Yeah, the fans reacted in such a loud and very clear manner. That's one. And number 2 is Greg Vanney's quotes. Greg Vanney's quotes in particular kind of reframed the way I was thinking about the season, and it's important to. I had just kind of lost sight of the fact that these players are sacrificing so much and risking so much. Particularly, it needs to be said, the players on the Canadian teams who are away from their families for 3 or 4 months at a time now.
Away in a country that's more dangerous, via that than where they live.
Yeah. So I think that though once he put that out there in the way that he did, it became inarguable that the Shield should have been awarded, as it always is. I think that I'm glad that the fans and the players and the coaches made such a racket that the Shield Foundation board revisited and reversed their decision. And I hope that what comes out of all of this is that the Shield Foundation board is more transparent henceforth in whatever their decision-making process happens to be in future years. Though hopefully, hope to God we never have a year as wild as this one. But it's like, it is case closed now. I never have to hear some, I'm not going to use a 4-letter word, I am, some jerk say the Shield doesn't matter from here on out. The Shield clearly matters. It is, for me, it is still clearly the best trophy, the best domestic trophy to win, because it means you gave your fans months upon months upon months of great winning soccer. And now, whether it's Toronto or Philly, because frankly, those are the only two teams that have a chance to win it this year, one of those fan bases at the end of this 2 weeks from now is going to get the trophy that they deserve. And hopefully at some point, everybody will be able to get together and hoist it together and hoist a couple of beers as well and celebrate a piece of silverware.
Well, there go the sirens. I don't know what that means. We're not using the mute. This is not a presidential debate. So props to Calen Carr for really sitting back and letting that argument play out. I know you were raising your hand. You were waiting for your moment. You have the floor, Calen.
No, I mean,
Calen's got 2 minutes.
Who am I to argue with Doyle? Like, there is no argument anymore. The Shield is the best domestic trophy.
Yes.
There's nothing else. There's nothing beyond this. That's it. No.
Blink if you're being held hostage.
Look, I would still prefer MLS Cup. Now, I don't disagree that the Shield is the more difficult trophy to win. But I think the one that I would rather have still is MLS Cup. And until this whole system changes and there is no MLS Cup playoffs, and that, if and when that day comes, I still want the MLS Cup. But I will agree and say, yes, it wasn't just the fans that said, hey, this is really important to us. I actually think a big shift of it, like you said, was Greg Vanney, but he was speaking on behalf of his players. And Alejandro Bedoya spoke up, and others did as well. And so I actually think the big shift is much more, and this has been happening for a while now, and I'm totally happy to acknowledge this, is that it has become much more important to the players than it was in the past, where I think before it was more like, we want to win every game, we're going after it, we want to win every game, we want to put ourselves in a good position to win MLS Cup. And then it was like, oh yeah, and we got this trophy that's for the fans, and that's great, and that's fantastic. But now it's like, I think because it really has become a bigger thing, sort of, and recognition of where MLS fits in like global football, is that the recognition that it is such a difficult thing to do, almost in more ways even more challenging in a lot of ways in MLS, because of the parity within the league and the amount of travel and all of the different conditions and altitude and weather and all those different things that fit in. So I think, look, I'm all in on the Supporter Shield. I support you, Doyle, but I still want MLS Cup.
Fair.
Doyle,
fair.
what Calen's saying is your victory in this for the Supporter Shield is the Supporter Shield of argument victories, and Calen still has the MLS.
Well, I mean, he considered he
That's why I
conceded
want
that
it so bad.
it's the toughest victory. That's the thing. So
But less important to him.
Doesn't always. Sometimes, yeah. I don't know. Playoffs.
Look, it was a lot of there was a lot of gnashing of teeth about this, and I think that was actually good. I think some of this process was good, and I know it felt like oh my God, the conflict at times. But I think in what you're saying, and both of you have said this, sort of the outcry of like, hey, this is important from all corners, memorializes this thing even more, makes it even bigger. And in my mind, not doing it for 1 year is a break in tradition that was more detrimental than it was like understandable and positive in recognizing the hardships. The point was to recognize the hardships and to reward the team that found a way to get through those hardships. And right now it'll be the Union or Toronto, we think. And it clearly will mean more for the Union. I'm not often saying that, right? It will mean so much more for the Union than it would mean to Toronto FC, although it would mean plenty to them too, just because Toronto already have it. They've already got the points per game things. They've already got the runs to MLS Cup. They've got the CCL. I personally, and I'll just put it out there, hope that the Union win it. I think it would be a special moment and a special year for a club that's doing things in the right way. And let's talk about the defenders for a second. LAFC, they didn't get MLS Cup last year, though they wanted it, but they did get the Shield, and they got some history along with it. And now they have Carlos Vela back. And I think I had tricked myself into believing, or maybe I was protecting my heart. I don't know what I was doing. Maybe I misread the news, or I skimmed a headline, or I just checked out like so many of us have at times over the past couple of months. I assumed that Carlos Vela was never going to be back this season, that he was on ice, that it was just like, hey, that game in August where he limped off, I was like, all right, Bob, all right, John, like, just put him away. Put your favorite toy away and bring him back for 2021. Well, that's not the case. He's back on the field. First of all, celebrating Danny Musovski goals, which is legit. Like, those are the moments that I love. It's like Danny Musovski scores and Carlos Vela is jacked on the sideline warming up. And then he comes in and does his own chip routine, and LAFC take the points in El Tráfico. What does this mean? Carlos Vela back. How does this change the landscape of Major League Soccer for the rest of this year? Is this the sort of like ground-shaking development that I feel it is? Or was I just like to have my head buried for 3 months and didn't know Vela was going to be back?
Well, can I say he looked a step slow to me. He looked a step off. He didn't look game sharp. He didn't look game fit, and he still looked 2 steps better than everyone else.
I also think he looked better.
Like, he didn't get his first touch. His first touch a couple times, he wasn't able to kind of really burst the way that we're used to seeing him, and it just kind of left him open. He still gets dragged down for the foul. He still is able to gain that edge. He looked, even on the goal, it was kind of like maybe even a little unsure for a moment, and then the right foot chip to the back post. So it's like he's just that talented, and I think you are right, Weeby. I think this does change the picture dramatically, and I think because of LAFC's system has been so successful and celebrated over the past, that we've sort of forgotten how much a difference one player can make. And just even the way when I saw him come on with Bradley Wright Phillips and then Rossi on the left-hand side, the way that they were able to interchange and interact, we saw even on the goal, the way that Bradley Wright Phillips was able to drive into the heart of the defense. I mean, that looks real scary for the rest of the league.
The scary thing to me, and you're right, Calen, I agree with all that. Just like kind of internally giggling at the notion of Carlos Vela maybe just embracing the Ilsinho role for the rest of the year. Like, you have to chase around Brian Rodriguez for 55, 60 minutes, and then Vela comes on. He's rested, nice and hydrated, gonna mess around a little bit, play with Bradley Wright Phillips. That is like Bradley Wright Phillips being healthy and looking like he's 25 instead of 35. This is like the role he was born to play, because the LAFC attack is never going to revolve around him. The LAFC attack revolves around that central midfield's ability to control the game and open gaps for the winger, and then the number 9 just has to pick his spots and combine a little bit. He's a secondary or tertiary option. Bradley Wright Phillips is going to be unstoppable in that role. It is like I could see LAFC, in terms of attacking output, hitting a higher level down the stretch here and into the playoffs than they hit last year when they were the best attacking team of all time. The question is still, defensively, can they do it? And in that sense, the addition of Jesus Murillo is arguably bigger than the return of Carlos Vela. Because if Murillo is as good as he's looked these first 2 games, then maybe LAFC don't have to win every game 4-3. Maybe they can occasionally win a 2-0 like they had this past weekend.
This is the reward that BWP deserved for just running himself ragged for years and years and years and years. Is to play with Carlos Vela and Diego Rossi and Brian Rodriguez and Atuesta. And if Mark Anthony Kaye comes back this year, Mark Anthony Kaye, and Cifuentes looks good, and Ginella is underrated, I still think, despite his 22-22 snub. I mean, this is a reward for him. It's perfect. Like, he's putting up, as Tudor Rahman keeps driving down our throats, non-PK goal and assist numbers that are better than almost anybody in the history of this league.
Yep.
Like, he had to do yeoman's work for so long, and he didn't get the final reward at Red Bull, which would have been MLS Cup, but they did have all those wonderful moments and relationships and friendships.
Supporter shields.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I was about to make
Free
the
shields.
reference.
Yeah.
I know. I get it. I was about to make the reference. But now he gets Calen Carr's number 1 goal. Maybe. MLS
Maybe.
Cup, and he gets to play with Carlos Vela. Like, it seems so perfect to me after everybody kind of wrote him off. I thought Dave had something to say there. You kept nodding, and like you would try to jump in on Calen, and now I'm like just sitting here waiting, and it got awkward, so I filled the empty space.
I agreed with what everyone said.
Okay.
But I think we talked about this last week. I think Murillo is a huge addition for them, and even if Vela's not a part of it, to bring him in defensively, to play El Munir at right back, stop playing Blessing there, and then even just to get Rodriguez and Rossi back would have been enough. So the Carlos Vela is Dainu, which is for like that joke was for 3 people. Thank you to those 3 people. I nailed it. But they have enough in the attack. I'm not worried about that. It was defensive, and I think Murillo's fixed a lot of that. I think it's been a good move. And I think that this is an LAFC team that I don't think we're going to say going into playoffs are favorites over Seattle or Portland. But head-to-head, if they're healthy, they can beat anyone.
Wow, you're letting Anders in the private chat just sway you on that Sounders take. He's swaying you, man. Well, how about this one? How about this? Ball in or out?
Sorry, trophies. Rings, baby.
It's out of bounds, baby. It's
Ball
out.
in or out?
It's out. Clearly out.
You can see without a shadow of a doubt. You are
Without a shadow of a
100%
doubt.
sure.
100% out of bounds. It's gone.
And what do I get if you're wrong? You got to put some stakes on this.
How do we know? I mean,
How do you know that you're
Exactly.
100% right?
That's the whole point. How do we know? That's the whole point. That's like the entire basis of video review. If you have to say, how do we know? You don't know, so you can't reverse it.
I know, but you idiots don't know. How are you guys supposed to know? It's
I don't
clearly
need
out.
to know, Calen.
Raise
You're
the
trying to
flag.
reverse
It's
the
out of
call.
bounds. It's a
You're
corner
trying to
kick.
reverse it. I'm already right. I'm already correct. It wasn't called on the field. It's not reversible. You play on. That's it.
And that's the problem here is that the Galaxy, I mean, go through the theatrics, which, understandable. You want the ball to be a corner kick. You go through the theatrics, but then you maybe should play. And if you're Jonathan Klinsmann, you maybe shouldn't come steaming out of your 6-yard box like a runaway freight train and have, again, Danny Musovski chip you like it was the easiest thing in the world. I mean, this is an interesting moment, I think, because it's a lot of sort of like internalized beliefs about the game and about the rules that come out in this one moment. Like, do you play on despite the fact that a call that you think was wrong goes against you? What is VAR and video review's role in the game? How many, do we have the right camera angle, and what is clear and obvious? Like, there's so much to dig into here. Like, when you see this in a bigger sense, Calen, what do you think about? Do you have memories? Do you have experiences with this on the field? Did you have a flashback where you're like, oh my God, like...
Well, yeah, actually, I did learn the hard way my rookie year. We had a game in Kansas City, and I'm going to play right back, actually, because we were a man down. And
who was your coach? Was it Bobby Warshaw? Or...
No, this was no, I wish. No, I had Sarakin at the time, and I remember Jose Burciaga Jr.
Oh. Legend.
Yeah.
Legend.
The ball was out of bounds clearly.
Like your definition of clearly, or like a normal rational person?
I had a better view to be fair, of this one because I was a lot closer to it. But it was clearly out, and he was smart and a vet and just kept running. And I raised my hand. He runs down the sideline. I think squares it in. Josh Wolf taps it in, and I think we lost as a result. And it was a valuable lesson for a rookie to play the whistle, not bank on the referees for it to go out of bounds. That said, that was on the sideline. I was in my own defensive half. I was playing right back at the time. So yes, there's no raising your hand. That's unforgivable. This is a completely different situation where you're standing at completely 100 yards on the other side of the pitch. And if it's out of bounds there, that potentially can give the Galaxy a set piece, which at that time is their most likely way of scoring.
Their only chance of scoring.
Right? So you have to, at that point, and it's a part of the game, to influence the referee however you can, to raise the flag or to try and get that call in that moment. So I don't fault the Galaxy for pausing or raising their hand at that time. Maybe some of the center backs, I think, who are probably, at that point could react a little bit. And as a center back, your mentality has to be more like what could go wrong at all times in this, because it really was just a direct straight ball. It wasn't a very clever ball through. And then Rossi picks it up and plays a ball through to Musovski, who I don't think that finish was as easy as you guys are saying it was.
I'm not saying it was easy. But I'm saying Jonathan Klinsmann gave him every opportunity in the book to go do it.
A guy from 25 yards out.
Well, Jonathan Klinsmann was not 25 yards out. Jonathan Klinsmann steamrolled out of his goal. He was at the 18-yard box. Anyway, that's not here. That's not here nor there. It was a good goal. Danny Musovski's had a nice little season. Like,
go Lobos.
Jeez, God,
Yeah.
I thought he was
CID.
I think it was out.
He's a UNLV guy. Are they not the Lobos?
No, that's New Mexico.
Oh, go New Mexico.
No, he's not. He's UNLV. Oh, God. Anyway, there's something else to this, too, which is like video review, the era of video review, and how it affects the way players play. And we were in the pre-meeting, Dave, and I'm just going to use that as a way to set you up here instead of trying to make it natural.
Yeah,
I had a great point about how mindsets have to change with the times and maybe haven't completely.
Yeah, so you look at a game right now, and the referees are calling it. And so to Calen's point, I think this situation's a little different because it happens in the attacking half. But you see center backs and defenders still continuously try and step forward and call an offside and stop play to make it obvious so that they get the call, which is what they've always done. Now you're in a situation where referees are going to let play on because they can come back and review if someone does score. So it's harder for them to call offside. So you need to continue playing and also understand everything is checked. They don't need you to referee the game in that moment. And for a long time, and I think this is what Calen's talking about, where he came through, it was like on the players to force the referee to make the call. And now you're in a situation where anything that is potentially a goal scoring opportunity, they're going to let play through. You need to make sure you continue to play through so you don't let them score. And if they were offside, the VAR will catch that and do it themselves. So you don't need to be the one who shows everyone, hey, no, it's offside. Everything is being checked and everything's being covered, and you don't need to make that point. Your job now is to continue to stay locked in and play, so it's not a goal.
All right, for more on the Galaxy and LAFC, we go to Alicia Rodriguez at Soccer Musings on Twitter. You know her, you love her, you read her at SBNation on like 5 million things. Alicia, welcome. Thank you for keeping with the motif here. I didn't get the memo. I didn't know we had to go all white today.
Yeah, I'm looking for a clean, crisp look for fall. So actually, it's just I haven't bothered to nail up all the pictures and stuff that I have for this room. So that's honestly what it is.
Don't apologize. We are taking the Scandinavians for hundreds of years have tried to fight winter depression by keeping things bright and light inside and clean. Me and Alicia are just on that trend.
Let me give you a little advice here. Just go get some 3M hooks and
just
some plastic hangers and just throw some shirts on them. That seems to work pretty well for me. My wife hates it, but what are you going to do? Let's talk about this LAFC Galaxy game, El Trafico. We don't have the fans. We know that makes it even more magical. But LAFC, from being a team that we were thinking, ooh, something's not quite right, now seem like a team that are kind of terrifying with Carlos Vela and Jesus Murillo and a lot of verve attacking-wise, and some solutions defensively.
Yeah, they're getting most of their, core group back, and so it's been a rough few months, I think, for LAFC. They've certainly not been at the pace that I think we expected them to be coming into the season. But given all of the injuries, the weirdness that is 2020, international absences, it's kind of understandable why they haven't been quite as dominant as they were last season. And like you said, they're getting most of their key players back now. And so it looks like they can kind of ride this into the playoffs potentially. And, who knows, maybe be something pretty strong.
I was under the impression, and maybe I was completely wrong, clearly I was completely wrong, that maybe they would kind of hold back on Carlos Vela and say 2020 is kind of a wash. Let's not rush him back. Let's make sure that he's okay. How have you followed sort of his recovery process? Where's he at, really? And is he ready to be back in the starting lineup anytime soon?
I think that's how they're going to approach the next few games for Carlos. It's going to be kind of easing him back into the lineup. I imagine maybe he'll get a start on decision day, possibly, but probably, work him up to fitness, bringing him off the bench, getting him some minutes. I thought he looked really good on Sunday. He played for 20 minutes. He took some contact, which is a big thing after a knee injury, and he got right back up. He obviously scored a goal, which was a huge bonus. He just looked a lot better than I think he did in August in the game where he got hurt. Mm-hmm. He hadn't played for several months at that point, and he just looked so much stronger. Obviously there could be a setback. He's still working up to fitness, but to me, it looks like he's on track. And when he hurt the MCL, I thought this is like a 3 to 4 month injury. So it's proved to be, typically they are for, basketball players. That's typically kind of the timeline for basketball players. So it seems like he's on track. And now it's a matter of kind of managing it and making sure he doesn't get any setbacks along the way.
So you brought up Murillo as well, who I think has been a big part of the way they've looked over the last 2 games. I'm curious, in 2020 and all the insanity, if this was a move that would have happened in May or June, if the world had been normal, and obviously trading Walker Zimmerman, was this always the plan? Or was this a reaction to the way they've looked this year and let's try and get something quickly, and they were able to find this loan?
I definitely think that this was in the works for some time. I don't know if it was in the works in February when they traded Zimmerman, but Murillo, he's played 2 games so far. I think he's slotted in really well so far. Yesterday, you could see he was, providing vocal leadership on the field, something that I think LAFC have needed in the back this season. He also can get up and can jump and defend balls up in the air, which is something they've desperately needed this year. So that's been a big plus. But I think it's a move that they were probably working on, maybe had an iron in the fire for a while. He wanted to get out of his club situation in Colombia. Obviously, LAFC already have a Colombian center back, so that's something that I think will help the adjustment for Murillo. Again, only a 2-game sample size so far, but so far so good for him. So if he's the real deal, I think that helps LAFC's playoff prospects a lot.
Can I ask you what Bob Bradley has been like this year, covering him sort of day to day? It's been a weird year. Bob is always opinionated. He's never shy about his opinions or the way he feels about things. What's the vibe you get from Bob in this year, maybe compared to years past?
That's a really interesting question. I think during the shutdown, I think I was one of the first people to talk to him. And you could really tell his humanity. It was one of those moments where he was really compassionate about the moment that we're in. And I think when you think about Bob, you often think about a fierce competitor, somebody who wants to win and, is really trying to take every advantage he can to get those victories, that kind of thing. And it was a little bit of a different side of him, somebody who was really compassionate, who was always shouting out the frontline healthcare workers, talking about trying to come together somehow in a crisis, that kind of thing. And then since the games have started, there's a little bit of weariness this season for him. And I think, again, it's something we're all kind of feeling. It's so great to have sports back. It's so great to have MLS back. But we're asking a lot of the players and the coaching staff, to play every 3 or 4 days. And there's been a few times when he's almost literally kind of thrown his hands up in the air and said, it's a crazy year. It's I don't even remember how many players we played this season. There's just so many games that are happening and that kind of thing. So it's been really relatable, I think, to talk to Bob this year, because I think talking to him, what he's going through is kind of what we're all going through right now.
I wonder if, from a club point of view for LAFC, has this year changed their minds? Do you think about anything in terms of, we came out with the list, they play the most under 22 players in the league. They go young. A lot of it is international. This year with injuries or losses, Cifuentes, Janela, at times Rodriguez, a lot of these younger guys have kind of struggled to carry the team. Do you think there's any change of philosophy for LAFC? For example, if they sell a Brian Rodriguez, do you think they'll bring in more established players going forward, or do they still believe in what they've built this club on?
I think they're going to stay the course for sure. And I think, if you're talking about struggles at times, Edward Atuesta struggled in 2018, and he didn't necessarily look like a player who was going to be best 11 in 2019 when he first came in the league. So I think it's kind of the adjustment process and growing pains. I think in the case of Brian Rodriguez, it's a little bit different. He plays basically every game. And now we're seeing that he's really good at assists and maybe not as good, and at least in MLS, at scoring goals himself. But his situation may be a little bit different. But no, I think they're going to continue what they're doing. And now they're adding to the international youngsters that you mentioned. They're adding homegrown players, and it's players from their academy who are getting actual playing time. And Christian Torres, 16 years old, got some playing time, and then he ended up getting the equalizer last week against Portland, which was really a phenomenal goal. And I've been really impressed talking to him so far. He seems like one of those young players who maybe is mature beyond their years. So it's going to be pretty exciting to see players like him grow and see what they can do in the future.
All right, we know LAFC has a nice, steady foundation, let's say. Let's get out the tea. Let's do a little sipping, because the Galaxy are straight chaos. And not a lot of results, and a lot of uncertainty. And I'm just going to ask you straight out, was signing Chicharito a mistake?
I mean, I'm somebody who's believed in giving him a pretty long leash, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe not. To me, the big indication was the last game he played against Vancouver. He had a sitter to win the game, like in the final 5 minutes or so, and he completely missed it. So not only is it injuries and just the weirdness of this year, he looks like he may be completely out of form too, which is pretty concerning. There's always a lot of rumors circulating when it comes to Chicharito. I think most of them are bunk, but you never know. There could be some, real discontent, or there could be just a situation where it's not working out. I'm not saying for sure that that's the case here. I do think that it would not be shocking if he gets another year and then 2021 rolls around. Hopefully things are a little more normal. He finds some rhythm, he comes good basically. But you never know. I mean, it really looks like a kind of a dire point. I don't think he's the only thing that's wrong with the Galaxy at this point, but certainly when you pay a huge transfer fee, you have one of the big global stars that you think is going to push your club forward, and he's not getting the job done, then it's a concern for sure.
Do you think that he could come good in 2021, or is that outside the realm of possibility? Because I think of Chicharito and kind of the way you were saying, it may be that he's like a mismatched puzzle piece, but it also may be that the rest of the puzzle is all mismatched puzzle pieces and nothing is going to fit.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think he can come good. I mean, I have always thought that people don't really value him properly. I mean, I think he's a very good forward if you get him in the right situations and you get him in a rhythm. Presumably with a team like the Galaxy, you would think he'd be starting every game, and eventually he would get a rhythm. But he hasn't gotten a rhythm whatsoever this year. But like you said, maybe the puzzle pieces don't come together. And if that's the case, it may not be him that's the problem. It may be something else that's the issue. And if that's the case, then, I think the Galaxy definitely need to think about what they're going to do moving forward with this club. We
talked about it for a while during the Zlatan years of just, it was good because he was good. But to the puzzle point, it didn't make sense. Is it still the process of fixing what went wrong, or are the issues maybe higher up in the club still there and it's not being fixed? They're just continuing to sort of work themselves into a corner. Do you have a read of if it's going to get better with what's there, both on the field and in the front office, or is there still big changes that have to be made?
Well, I think to an extent, I can understand some of the frustrations in the Galaxy front office because when they hired Guillermo, Barros, Schelotto, and Dennis Teclosa, they said, we're going to need many transfer windows to remake the squad. Like, it's going to take some time. This is not something we're going to fix in one transfer window. It's going to take some time. And then the fact that the transfer window was disrupted so much this year means they really lost it. I mean, they did bring in Yoni Gonzalez on loan, to try and bolster the attack, but they've clearly been looking for a center back and they never got one. And so that's a huge issue. And that's been a big problem this year for them is defensive, their defense is just struggling all around. But do I think if they get the right players, then everything's going to click? I don't know. I mean, I really think that Schelotto's tactics have really been puzzling, and they played their best when they were high energy this year. They had a 4-game winning streak. They had a lot of energy in those games, and they seemed to run out of gas. And then, how can you overcome that if energy is something that's going to take you over the edge, and then you're playing 2 games a week, for 4 months, something has to give, and there doesn't seem to be an adjustment being made. And so, I'm not necessarily advocating for Schelotto to lose his job, but I think that it's natural to really consider if he can turn it around and if he can actually implement the tactics that are going to fit the squad he has, whether that's the players he wants or not.
So throw our opinions out. All three of us, our opinions don't matter. It only matters the decision makers at the club. In your view, from your reporting, from your read on the situation, how hot is Guillermo's seat? From hand warmer to like inferno?
I think it's pretty warm. I don't necessarily know if it's on fire, although I think the fact that the front office has conspicuously showed up to the last 2 games is a hint that they're making some big decisions and his job could be in danger. Typically for the Galaxy, the front office members do come to games, but they're usually not shown on TV. There's usually not like a big show of it. There's been a big show the last 2 games, so I think that that's a hint that they're at least considering a change.
I'm going to ask this question, and I don't know if I'm asking it the right way. But the Galaxy, over the course of the years, they've had ups, they've had downs, but generally they've been a club that has had prestige and has had a level of respect from the rest of the league and the world. And I think there's still elements of that, but I wonder, in your mind, in LA, with LAFC sort of muscling in, has the Galaxy lost their shine at all? Are they a little bit just less, I don't know how to describe it. It's just kind of a feeling, you know what I mean?
Well, certainly, I think if they were competing for MLS Cup, I think there would be, the brand would be stronger for sure. Los Angeles is a town full of, 2-team sports. And so people can choose which one they want to root for. And so in that regard, if you're not winning, then people don't necessarily want to follow you. That's kind of the name of the game in the city. Having said that, I don't know necessarily that, it's all gone, it's all over. They've lost the market share, it can't be recovered. I definitely think it can be recovered. If you put together a good season or 2, people are going to come. And, it works the reverse way for LAFC as well. If LAFC really hit a slump and they really start to struggle, they're also going to lose some market share, and the Galaxy can take that back. So it's really kind of fortune favors the bold. And so whoever is winning is going to be in a great spot, and whoever is trying to play catch up will be working on catching up. But nothing is set in stone at this point. And I think you still find a lot of households where people are just interested in soccer in LA, or maybe they have divided loyalties within a household, and it's going to stay that way.
So I want to move north a little, because anyone who follows Alicia knows she covers 37 teams professionally, constantly. So let's get to the other 37 while we have some time. San Jose and Matias Almeida, comment came out a few weeks ago that he was kind of just ready for the season to be over. They're flirting on the playoff line, a tough loss to Vancouver this weekend. We thought it would be year 1 was building and year 2 was going to take it to the next level. Year 2 has, of course, been a global pandemic and chaos, which hasn't helped things. Do you have a read, though, on if Matias Almeida has an idea of where they're going, if the club is taking those steps in the right direction, or is it still, to Weeby's point, the best adventure ride in all of MLS?
It's definitely an adventure, game to game. You never know what you're gonna see each game and each post-game press conference. That's for sure. But I do think they have a plan in mind. I wonder how much they're planning to spend in this next off season. I think that's going to be pretty critical. If we saw coming into this season, they made one big signing. That's it, one signing, and that was for a team that last year had some promise, but they clearly needed some upgrades, and they got one. But Osvaldo Alanis, and he hasn't actually played a ton this season, so he hasn't even been a lockdown starter necessarily. So I think if they can open the checkbook a little bit and obviously sign smartly, not just spread the cash around. We've seen San Jose under past regimes spend money and to no effect, but hopefully they can actually get the right players in. I think they do have a plan in mind, but I also think that this has been a very trying year for them in particular, because like I said earlier with the Galaxy, San Jose's entire approach is based on energy. And so he asks so much out of his players every single game. And so when they're being asked to run pell-mell around the field for 90 minutes every single time out. If there's any drop in energy, any drop in intensity for them, I mean, they have no chance in a game, and they know that. So it's pretty much, stick the knife between your teeth and get out there for 90 minutes, and that's that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the off season. I definitely think there's going to be some transition, but we'll see if they can actually upgrade the talent to kind of match MLS standards.
I love the imagery of stick the knife between your teeth, and I imagine like the entire team, like Pirates, Mateus Almeida, with the long flowing, the nice cap over the side, boys.
Oh, sorry.
It's beautiful. They don't seem to give up on him. Everybody seems to believe in him, and that's the most incredible thing. I know he's a motivator, but let's go a little bit. Let's see. I'm doing my directions here.
This is your part of the world, Weeby. I don't know you. So you got to get these directions right.
Yeah, that's true. Let's see. Northeast to Sacramento, where word on the street is they're like tearing up the squad ahead of their MLS entry. What's going on there? And is Mark Briggs, is he the guy? Is he going to be that MLS head coach?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, Briggs had a pretty good debut season. I don't know if listeners or viewers are familiar, but the USL Championship this year had a group stage for the bulk of their season. And Sacramento had a pretty easy group, but they made good work of it. They got through to the playoffs, and then they lost a heartbreaker to Phoenix, in extra time, a handball goal. So their season ended abruptly, but I think it was a pretty decent season, all things considered. Having said that, it looks like they're making a lot of changes because, there were some clear issues, I think, over the course of the season as far as coherence and attack and making sure they get players who can score. Briggs said in his end of season availability that he is definitely looking for a scorer in the off season. So I think that's a hint that some changes are coming. And then Rodrigo Lopez, who had a cup of coffee in MLS, he returned to Sacramento this past season, and he is also moving on. So they look like they're making some big changes. I think it looks like the plan is for Briggs to move up to MLS with them. Obviously, I don't have any set indication. Nobody's told me for certain that that's what's happening, but it looks like that's probably the plan at this stage. So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that tricky territory of building a roster to play in USL Championship for a couple seasons while also looking to the future and setting the groundwork for a roster in MLS.
All right, if you care about any soccer in California, I mean, literally any soccer, it doesn't matter where it's played, what time, Alicia Rodriguez is the person you should be following for it. At Soccer Musings, follow her work at SBNation, of course, an original, or at least it feels like an original at MLSsoccer.com as well. We miss you, Alicia. And we're happy to read your work every single week. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on. I miss you guys too, but at least I get a few minutes of screen time with you.
Always love chatting with Alicia, a legend in this game. Let's dive into the playoff races, as confusing and random as they feel, because we're used to like this long season building up to this point, and then I look at the standings today and I'm like, hold on, 3 more games? You guys are talking about this opportunity for the Union to win the Shield. I'm like, 3 more games? That's all we have until the playoffs? And yes, for some teams it is 3 more games. For other teams, namely the Colorado Rapids, it is many more games. But here we are. Who has the most to play for? Who beneath the line, in your minds, can make the jump? Who's got pressure? Who's got opportunity? Who should we be paying attention to most, Doyle, over the last couple of weeks of this regular season?
Are we talking just beneath the line, or are we talking?
No, you can go anywhere you want. It could be a team that could drop and their expectations could drop with them and maybe have some change. It could be a team that would jump. It could be a team, like the Union going for a trophy. We already beat that one to death.
Right. I think it's actually kind of more interesting I'll say this. There's one super interesting team in the Western Conference, and that's Sporting KC, who went top of the West on total points, not quite points per game yet. But we've been saying for a decade, okay, what happens if you give Peter Vermees some money? What happens if you can go out and get an $8 or $10 million striker, maybe add a central midfielders, and like he did that with Alan Pulido and Gadi Kinda this year. And then he's gotten, superb production from guys kind of down the depth chart, Eric Hurtado Island forever. But also the big thing to me is what we've seen over the past month and a half. He's had to integrate some of the young players and some different players in different spots. Jalen Lindsay, Punchech in central defense. And this has come while Graham Zusi hurt and out for the year, and Matt Beasler first hurt, and now not like he's making the 18, but he's not playing anymore. And it feels like a real changing of the guard has happened for Sporting KC. They're more mobile than they were last year, than they were earlier this year. When Polito is playing like he has been, they have one of the best attacks in the league. And now with Roger Espinoza, who's one of the old guard who has not yet kind of aged out, with Roger as, Weeby's guy.
Happy birthday, I think.
Oh, there you go. You're muted, Weeby. With Roger.
Whoops, the baby's teething. Happy birthday, Sunday, actually, for Roger Espinoza.
There you go.
With Roger playing the way he has been, Sporting Kansas City are super dangerous in the Western Conference and maybe at the same level as Seattle and Portland. In the Eastern Conference, there's two teams that I'm really focusing on. NYCFC, in large part because what you said earlier in the show, David, was that Toronto is the bogey team for Philadelphia. I don't think so. I actually think it's NYCFC who have handled Philly and really ripped them apart in some big moments over the last couple of years. They have not played well. They're without James Sands for the rest of the year, without Eber for the rest of the year. Castellanos, I think, will be back. Maxi Morales was great this weekend, but he's shown his age this year.
Very shoddy, I think, is questionable as well.
Yeah. So it feels like it's this is maybe the window is closing on what was a 4-year chance to win a trophy for NYCFC. And then beyond them, it's the Revs. The Revs have been better in terms of the run of play than their record indicates this year. Whereas last year, they were actually worse. Last year, it was Matt Turner bailing them out week after week after week. Now they have a completely solid defense. They've created this rotation of deep lying central midfielders: Caldwell, McNamara, Polster, Kellen Rose getting some time there as well. And what they haven't been able to do is turn all those good moments they're generating into goals because their DPs have either been hurt or under-delivered. Well, Adam Books has started looking pretty good the past 4 or 5 games. I think he has 3 goals and an assist in his last 5 games. His goal against Nashville was filthy. That was a goal scorer's goal. So he's suddenly looking like a DP, and then they get Carlos Heel back this weekend. That is huge as well. And then on top of that, Tejan Buchanan, who I think we all think has a ton of talent, he has started looking more settled and more decisive in the final third. So if there's a dark horse team to keep an eye on in the Eastern Conference, it's the Revs. They can go into this playoffs, whether or not they finish the regular season strong, which I think they will. They can go into this playoffs and they could ruin the year for some teams.
So Maxi Morales back, Carlos Heel back, Carlos Vela back, Lucas Zelarayan back this weekend, Darlington Nagbe back this weekend. What was the biggest one of those returns? What grabs you the most? It's for Calen or Dave?
Well,
first one to it.
Mine's obvious, Vela, but
okay, I'll take Vela off the board. That's the way the rules work. Zelarayan, Nagbe, Heel, or Morales? What's the biggest one as far as long-term implications and your biggest prize, MLS Cup?
I would say it's Zelarayan. I think Nagbe is one of the most important players in the league, but I think Columbus can replace some of what he brings. Zelarayan's ability, and we didn't totally see it against Houston. It wasn't a great performance for them, but his ability to create out of nothing is the one thing that Columbus can't really replace. Pedro Santos has played well. They've gotten production on the wings, but that little extra step that Pasuelo gives Toronto, that Ladero can give to Seattle, and they have over the last few years, that's something that they don't have, and Zelarayan brings. I was just going to say one more thing on the standings outside of that, which is I agree on Doyle's points towards the top. Towards the bottom, I think there's 2 teams that I think there's going to be a couple teams that make the playoffs, and it's not enough because there are so many teams making it this year because of expectations. The 2 teams that could make it, and it's, wow, they made the playoffs, and they can tout that, I think are Vancouver and Chicago. Not in a positive way, maybe, that they did it the way they want, but those are 2 franchises that just need it this year. They need to be able to say, Nashville's in that list as well, but we kind of beat it last week. They're probably in, and they've played well, and so they have moved out of that category. But if Vancouver and Chicago can back into the playoffs, it's going to be a good end of the year. Ooh, whoa, exciting. Good end of the year for them. And that's kind of enough.
Do you have any feelings on your Fire, Calen? Are they your Fire, or is it your Dynamo? Or
Dude, I've got the Fire sweatshirt
Really?
on. You can't tell
What?
it's all
What?
There's a logo in there.
Yeah.
I mean, he wakes up like
That was
this,
when
folks.
the Fire were going through their goth phase when they were all
Yeah, it was because I see Robert Barrich get another goal, and he's got 9 on the year, and they
Newcomer of the year.
perform. Yeah, huh?
Yeah, well,
Newcomer of the year.
He's been hot too. I think 7 in his last 9 too. So especially kind of if you want your striker scoring goals at the right time. But the Fire have been up and down. I think the problem for them is consistency to get like a good run of games. But I think they're a team that if they got into the playoffs could surprise some people as well. So yeah, I don't know. The consistency part worries me a little bit, but they've got some good production, especially moving forward.
So
Doyle, I'm going to quote you real quick, Doyle, before I cut you off here. Officially the most underrated number 9 in the league. That's what you wrote about Robert Barrich.
Yeah, he's as Calen said, he's scoring a lot of goals, which is the number one thing you want to see from your number 9. The man has a chance at as David gets.
I have no idea what's happening.
The man has a chance at winning the Golden Boot, but if you look at the way he's able to function, both within the scope of normal build-up play, and then what we saw this weekend against the Red Bulls was they used him as the focus, like the focal point of their entire game plan. He allowed them to just completely play over the Red Bulls press. And for 90 minutes, it worked perfectly because he would just win the ball and either lay it off, sometimes send runners through, sometimes just get it upfield and put Chicago in a position where they weren't able to be pressed. It defanged the Red Bulls for 90 minutes. The Red Bulls generated only 3 shots, none from the press. But this is why the Fire are still below the playoff line. They completely fell apart in stoppage time. The Red Bulls went upfield. They generated 6 chances in stoppage time. Brian White got, I mean, I consider that a golazo, the equalizer. And it's just like, this is like the Fire are the polar opposite of the Revs. They don't have that solid defense. They make like soul crushing. Paul Salazar, our good friend and video editor, he called them soul crushing boners every week from the Fire. And they have 3 or 4 games now. I think they have a game in hand on the teams they're chasing. If they play as well as they have been, they should get, maybe 2-1-1. They should get 7 points out of that remaining schedule. That might be enough. But given how they've played over the past 6 weeks, they shouldn't be in a position where that might be enough. They should already be comfortably above the line. And it's a question of whether those guys on the back line can actually execute.
All right. 401-206-0MLS, extra time at MLSsoccer.com. That is how you get at us for the mailbag. We have a lot of teams to cover in this league these days, 26 to be exact, and even more, as you heard Alicia Rodriguez talking about with Sacramento and all these expansion teams. If you want us to dig into your team, sometimes our sensibilities, what we think is interesting, what we may have just watched on that particular weekend doesn't match up, please get in the mailbag with any of that. Make us talk about your team if you're unhappy about it. The flip side is if you have Continental Award suggestions, we're still taking that. I'm trying to finalize the official list, but I have a lot of the ones that folks sent in. I'm going to write a column with those this week, so look out for that one as well. Thank you, as always, for doing my job for me. All right, let's get into it, Dave. What do we got? What do you like?
Starters here. We talked about SKC a little, but Jerso's Black Lives Matter celebration was legit. Deserves a special shout out from someone who claims themselves as the MLS clown in LA. I don't know what that means. Whatever you want to do.
Is that like MLS Muppet?
Maybe.
There were a lot of good chips this weekend. It was a good weekend for chips. Yeah, and also like the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil aspect of his celebration. That was really well done.
Absolutely. We've got some 22 under 22 complaints. Derek Ashleman says Pablo Ruiz is the biggest snub on the 22 under 22. He has been one of RSL's best and most consistent players game in and game out.
That's a strong take. Biggest snub, very strong take, given there's $35 million worth of players on that list down below. Doyle, did you listen to our conversation or did you enjoy your vacation? And if you didn't listen, feel free to just give your 22 under 22 takes right now.
I didn't listen to the conversation. Andres kind of filled me in. So this is with the entire 22 under 22 list. I think that the right two guys were at the top. You can argue between Aronson and Rodriguez, but there wasn't a clear number one like there was last year with Rosie, like there was the year before with Alphonso Davies, like we've seen sort of historically with this one. What there was probably about 15 guys who had a case to be in the top 5, and then about 30 guys who had a legitimate case to be anywhere from 6 to 22. And Pablo Ruiz was one of those 30 guys, but I just don't think he's played enough, and he's a little bit older. Like this is his last year of eligibility. He hasn't really done it. RSL are below the playoff line, so it's tough to make a compelling case for him over guys who did miss it, like I believe Cifuentes and Ginella both missed it.
Yeah,
like
Diego Palacios missed it. I believe did Pellegrini miss it too?
Pellegrini, well,
Carranza.
Ruiz has been better than both those guys, so I have no problem with him. But there were more quality young players who got minutes this year, and that made it more difficult to put in guys who are maybe having decent seasons but don't have like a really long track record. And at the same time, I left Jesus Ferreira off my list.
So did I.
Because I think he's a good young player, but I still don't know his position, and he has regressed mightily over what was a really good 2019 season. So there's been a lot of that, and that's what these lists are for. Right. That's why we do this type of content, and we think about players in these types of ways. And I think in all, I don't have a ton of gripes with what we saw. Though I think it was Moses Nyman sneaking in there at the end. Took me for, that threw me for a loop a little bit, because he's been good, but he's still so far away from looking anything like a finished product.
Let's talk about another one of the buzz names that got left off. This is Jared. First email to the show. Been loving listening to this show from Canada for the past few years. So keep up the good work. I'm a Whitecaps fan, but as far as the 22 under 22 list, how in the world is Fontana not on it? I know he doesn't have the minutes that most of the guys on the list have, but 6 goals in 440 minutes this year. How can you ignore that? Personally, I would take Fontana over Tessman or Broguillard. Also as a Whitecaps fan, I think Baldissimo definitely deserves a shout and should definitely make the list. On a completely unrelated note, David Goss deserves a shout out for singing "Oh Canada," even if I'm off tempo. You're welcome.
I'm not even gonna allow us to talk about Anthony Fontana, because Charlie has he's like 2-footed this 5 or 6 times. And Doyle, you wrote the column. If people want to know, just listen to the last show. Like, we couldn't even do the intro without Charlie jumping in and going into a challenge that I would send him off for normally as host to talk about Anthony Fontana. Anything else we have, or do we want to do something that we always want to do? Go ahead. No, we got something else. I see the excitement on your face, Dave. One more thing.
Do you want to talk random Americans who people get excited about?
Sure, I always do.
Okay, well, someone sent us an email a week or two ago that says, with the lack of U.S. striker options, could Aron Johannsson get a look? He's scoring in Europe. And then Anders, our producer, wanted to put in rumor out there that Johansson wants to move to MLS. Would it be a good move for any team? He's got 13 goals in 22 appearances for Hammarby, a club I don't know if you've ever heard of that Charlie Davies played for.
Is Anders trying to start rumors?
No, it's a rumor out there.
Yeah, it's a report.
Yeah, he. I think him and Jack Wilshere are going to be a package.
So it's they're only signing. Paul Tenorio's reporting it, or is it Sam?
No, it's a rumor. Okay. It's a Sam Knaskal.
Okay, got it. You said no immediately, Doyle. Why?
He's 30. He doesn't move well. He's scoring in a pretty weak league. The Scandinavian leagues are not what they were 10 or 12 years ago when our good friend Charlie Davies was there.
Ask this?
He has played more than 2,000 minutes once in his entire career. And I actually don't think that we have a shortage of strikers. Josh Sargent, I know he's not putting up numbers, but he's a Bundesliga starter. Soto is playing in the second tier in the Eredivisie, but he's scoring a goal a game at this point. Just looking in MLS, you have guys like Ayo Akinola, Daryl Dike. Obviously, Jossie has had a superb year as well. So I'm not saying no MLS team should take a look at Aron Johannsson. Like, if he wants to come over here and you can get him on a good number, kick the tires. But he's spent his entire career injured. Like, he has played more than 2,000 minutes once in his entire career, and he's about to be 30 years old. Like, this is not going to get better. And while I appreciate that people are kind of freaking out about the striker situation, our striker situation is not bleak enough to go for a 30-year-old who has only ever scored in Scandinavia. It's just not.
Okay, all right, everyone, hit pause. Head to your linen closet, your bathroom, wherever it is. Go get a towel, because you just got like gallons upon gallons of freezing cold water just dumped on you. All right, you're back.
He's a nice player. He scored four times in 20 games. He scored 4 times in 20 U.S. games when he was in his athletic prime and playing in the Eredivisie. And now he has been broken for half a decade, and he's playing for Hammarby. And now
man, I hope Aron Johannsson.
We have so many
good
young strikers, like Sargent, Soto, DK, Akinola, Jeremy Abobasi.
All right, look, I got to cut you off here because I just hope that Aron Johansson's wearing a watch because we're going to need to somehow find him. You just buried him. We're going to need something that's going to get the metal detector to start beeping once we find this dude. David and Skokie, I do want to read this before we throw it to our final little piece here. His final thought on the Continental Tire Awards. It is the Continental Awards in case you haven't figured that out so far. Get the name right, but we love you, David. The Daryl Grove Soccer Optimist of the Year for a player, coach, or media personality whose love of the game is so apparent in everything they do that you can't help but root for them. He says he doesn't have any nominations yet, but we might have some or more insight given our close interactions with the teams and other folks. If you have recommendations for that, I think that's a great one. Might throw that in my column. And last but never,
optimism, by the way, it's got to be Matt. If you're talking optimism, it's got to be Matt Doyle.
Exactly.
Look at perfect. A sunny disposition.
Okay, last but not least, the entire show has been leading up to this moment. Our brother podcast, the more intellectual side of what we do here at MLSsoccer.com, the movement. If you haven't subscribed, if you haven't listened to the first one, you should definitely do that. And a second one is about to be dropped. Is that right, Calen?
That's right. Wednesday. So yeah, make sure if you haven't subscribed to subscribe. If even if you haven't, I think it may just land in your lap anyways, because that's how we roll. But yeah, this one's all on the election and the MLS Unites to Vote campaign. So I went out to Philly, to Chester, as you guys know, to hang out with Mark McKenzie and Warren Craval. And it was turned into a 3-day voting center pop-up, which was really cool to see. So people were voting. I spoke to people coming in and out, casting their votes. And actually, the crazy part of this was that it was tried to be blocked before it opened. There was an emergency injunction trying to stop this from being opened. So also goes into some of the topics behind that, as far as like who gets the right to vote, how do you get to vote, and how difficult it can be at some times. So it's awesome to see MLS and Black Players for Change, MLSPA, coming together to try and really help people participate in our democracy. So it's it comes out on Wednesday. Check it out.
Yep, go check that out. And of course, if you have registered, make sure you go do the research and get your voting plan in place to make sure that your vote is counted, no matter how you see things in this election or in this country. And if not, go try to see if you can. It's never too late. There's a lot of places where you can still register. I think, maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know. Maybe I should do the research too. I just know that I got to go stand in line here in a little bit to cast my vote as well. So that's it for us. Big thanks to Alicia Rodriguez. We're thinking of Daryl Grove, his wife Shannon, Taylor Rockwell, the Total Soccer Show family. Again, if you have the means, helping them out with what will be very, very significant medical bills coming in is something that we can do for them, and I think more than what they've given over the years. So go do that if you can. We'll see you on Thursday with Charlie and Ray Gaddis. In the meantime, have a great week, everybody.